Hey guys, what's going on? It's your big bro Nate. Today's video is going to be about my ROTC experience in college. So a little bit different than the last couple of videos, but I just wanted to throw it out there. If anybody's interested, if anybody is just like, hey, what is ROTC all about? I'm thinking about it, starting up college, or maybe you've been at college for a little bit. So just want to give some ins and outs, pros and cons, some things, some insights, just kind of explain how it worked. So, all right, guys, long story short, I originally, when I joined the military, this was back in 2016, I joined the National Guard, and I have some videos on that as well. My experience in basic training and advanced individual training, even made a video on my experience in the National Guard over the course of 6 years. But when it came to ROTC, my plan was originally I wanted to go to college, and then while I was in the National Guard, I wanted to go to ROTC, and then about 2 years in, I wanted to go to the simultaneous membership program. What that does is you become a cadet in the National Guard with the intention of becoming a commissioned officer afterwards. Now, before I get into all the ins and outs and how that works as far as commissioning, I just want to explain how the actual ROTC experience was for me. Now, I wasn't in the full 4 years, okay? So I was in for a year and a half. So when I first started college, I immediately started going to ROTC. Now, cool thing about it, the college that I went to, I was actually able to get room and board paid for completely. So ROTC, basically at my school, we were put into the lowest cost dormitory. So I wasn't living anywhere fancy, but I was living on campus. I had my own space. I had somewhere to live, right? And it was on campus. It was super convenient. Only thing I had to really do, especially for my first year, was show up to PT, which changed a little bit, I think, when I was in, but it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday morning. Right before I started, they only used to have PT on Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings, but I think people were, they just said, well, it's better to do more than less PT. That's the Army for you. So I know in some colleges, they were only doing PT Monday through Wednesday, because a lot of students, they only have Monday, Wednesday classes, and then they're off Thursday through Sunday. So it depends where you go to school, depends where you go to college, depends what you do. So yeah, pretty simple. PT was very similar to the military when I was in it. You woke up, PT I think was at 6 o'clock. You had to be in formation at 5:45. You wake up at 5:15. You get dressed. If you're not already in your PTs, you shave. You got to make sure you're in the Army standards. You got to make sure your haircut's in regulation as well. You go for PT for an hour. You learn all the different Army ways to do PT. That changes a little bit as time goes on as well. So you do all their warm-up drills. Then you do either running, you do circuit training, you do a lot of push-ups and sit-ups and stuff like that. From what I remember, a lot of it in ROTC was just running. As an officer, you're expected to run a lot. You're expected to have really good run times. So we focus a lot on running upstairs. There was a stadium at our school, so we would run up the stairs, which was awesome. I mean, it sucked, but you got in shape. And we had a track, we had a football field. We did a lot of leg exercises, so fun stuff. Sometimes we would literally run around our campus at 6:30 in the morning, running up and down parking garages and around the empty campus, which was cool. But ROTC honestly was pretty cool. Besides PT, you really don't have to, especially in your first year or two, you don't really do a whole lot. It really picks up year 3 and 4. But in your first year or two, you're just kind of told what to do. People who are juniors and seniors are telling you what to do, where to be. So you're just kind of chilling. Like I said, every school is a little bit different. Sometimes they pay for your room and board. There's some benefits just realized like a lot of college students don't like waking up at 5 in the morning for an hour of physical training. Again, you got to keep your haircuts in standard. You can't be smoking weed. They do drug tests as well. And I believe the drug test is limited to the upperclassmen, the juniors and the seniors, because they're the ones who are actually contracted. I'll talk about that here in a minute as well. So you got to be careful. You're not in the military. A lot of these kids, like, they thought they're in the military, but until you are contracted on your year 3, you are not in the military really at any capacity. You could literally just decide to not show up one day and no one would care. Yeah, they're going to ask, like, hey, are you okay? Like, is everything good? The only thing you might have to do is pay back your room and board, which I had to do, and I'll talk about that here in just a second. So Thursdays for us, so that was what we called lab day. So it was about 1 p.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. or 2 p.m. It was like 3 to 4 hours on Thursday. I can't remember, but it was after lunch before like the evening. So we would do lab. Lab was a mix of anything and everything. During the fall, lab was primarily a bunch of soldier skills. So if you've been to basic training, if you have really any idea of how that works, it's a lot of the same stuff. So that stuff was super easy. Even the things we didn't touch on a whole lot in basic, like we did a bunch of things like calling in a 9-line medevac. So we had to learn a lot about like the communications. We did water survival training. So, you're jumping into your college pool. The lifeguards who work there are watching you, making sure you don't drown. You're doing all that kind of stuff, which was awesome. I loved the fall semester. I loved the basic soldier skills. Like, it was just fun. You do a little bit of tactics. So we had a park on campus, and sometimes we'd go to a park about 10 minutes away where we would do actual, like the battle drills. So we would do a little bit of instruction out in the field. Sometimes you have to pack a little rucksack or whatever, and you go out into the field, which is the park, and they have it closed off. You might have people walking around on trails, people who don't really care about what you're doing, but for the most part, people stay away from what you're doing. And you'll go across big giant fields or the woods, and you'll get into your battle formations. You'll have like a heavy, like an M249 gunner in one position. You'll have your rifleman. You'll have, goodness, it's been a while since I've been in, so I'm trying to remember exactly how it works. But you'll do the wedge formations, and everybody will learn how that works. That's a huge part of officer training, is knowing those tactics. But you do a little bit of that. I think they do it the last couple weeks. But honestly, guys, ROTC is pretty fun. So I forgot about this as well. So lab is like 2 to 3 hours long. Before lab, especially in your first 2 years, you're really just going to class. So you do have like an hour of class a week you have to go to. Again, a lot of this is just basic soldier stuff. You are learning how to read maps. If you've done this in basic, it's super easy. Even if you haven't, it's super easy. You can literally learn in like 20 minutes, and you can easily pass these tests. And they're gonna help you. The cadre is really cool. They're active duty. A lot of them have deployed, some haven't, but a lot of them have served in the military for, I'd say, at least 6 to 8 years. You have a lot of captains, and then you also have some sergeant first classes, so E7s and above, master sergeants. That's pretty popular. Sometimes this is very popular because of where students are, especially in their first year. You'll have a lot of the Army, especially the National Guard recruiters there, who try to get people to join. Again, they say, because the National Guard, at least at that time, had a lot of really good schooling benefits, they would try to get people to join. So they would come in and say, hey, join the National Guard, like between your summer break. Once you're done with your first year of college, go ahead and join the National Guard. Pick something that's quick, right? Or you can separate your basic and your AIT with like 2 summers, or A lot of times I think you could just do like a 09 Romeo contract, which was you basically just go to basic training and you enlist as a cadet, which means that you don't have to deploy. But if you're not contracted, then if the needs of the Army say you do, then you might. It's weird because you, from what I can remember, you can enlist as a cadet, but you are not contracted yet in ROTC. Weird how it works. But anyway, so yeah, class was fun, guys. Again, you're gonna have a couple of people, like especially some of the NCOs, some of the sergeants who are just coming from active. They might have come off a deployment. They're very high strung. They're very serious. Like, you really can't be dropped until you're contracted. So like if you're in your first or second year, I can't remember being dropped. I don't think we ever got dropped. Like push-ups. I don't think we ever got smoked. I really don't ever recall it. Now we would get chewed out, like we would get cussed at sometimes, but then I think people would basically rat out on the cadre, and then they would be nice to us because you can't be yelling at a bunch of college students. But I get it. You have NCOs who've been in the military for 10 plus years who come in, and all these college kids think they're in the military or they think they're the shit, and you're having to deal with all that. So that can be frustrating. So it does help being prior enlisted. It doesn't really matter though. Like some of the people who have been in, like there's a lot of people in ROTC who are like in their mid 20s because they enlisted active duty for a few years and then they decide to go to the military. You have guys in there who are, in their later 20s because they're finally starting college. A lot of guys are using their full GI Bills, so they're not really working. They're just doing ROTC and college, which is cool. I was thankfully in a position, I didn't have my full post 9/11 GI Bill, but I didn't really have to work. So I just really focused on school, and school is a huge part of your grade. So long story short, ROTC is going to be looking at a few things. And really the top three that I recall were your PT scores. Of course, that's huge. That's always going to be big in the Army. Just make sure you get your top PT scores. Workout, between classes or at the end of the day, the PT in the morning is not going to be enough. It's going to be enough to maintain. You're really not going to get a whole lot of extra from it. Some people will, but if you're in decent shape, you really won't. The second thing is going to be your school grades, like your actual school grades. So if you guys were ever in wrestling or football in school and your coaches were good and they said, hey guys, we really want you to focus on your grades at school too. Yes, this is important, your sport, but focus on your education as well. So they really focus on the education. That's a huge part because you want to make sure you get a good grade so you can actually graduate with your degree. The more GPA you have, the better chance you have of actually getting in as an officer. Guys, it all plays in. The third thing, so there's actually four things. I said three, but the third thing is going to be your peer evaluations. I call it officer land, is very big on politics. So how do your cadre, your NCOs, your captains, your class teachers in ROTC, how do they rate you? How do they basically like you? Do they see you as someone who's dependable? Do you just kind of do enough to get by? Do people know your name? That's a big deal. How are you with your peers? Do people talk about you? Do people say that you're encouraging? Do people say that you're good, coaching, that you're helpful? That doesn't mean you have to live your whole life in ROTC. It doesn't mean you have to live your life, always sacrificing, giving up all your free time, but that's a huge part of it. And the fourth thing, guys, when I talk about giving up your time, they have these special groups. So you can actually join every college. I believe is a little bit different, but there's different groups you can be a part of in ROTC. So I think, from what I recall, I'm trying to remember if I ever joined one because they would sometimes change them, and then there was more important ones and there were smaller ones, and I'm trying to remember, but there was something called ODM, I believe, which was basically all the guys who wanted to go combat arms, who wanted to go to Ranger School, ODM, you would have to go through like this mini, kind of like a basic train, but it's led by your peers, and it's like a week long or something like that, and they just smoke you. It's kind of like, I don't want to say SEAL training, because SEAL training is like actually tough, and this is just the college thing, but the idea, from what I remember from my friends, is, you know, they got up super early in the morning, they would go out and they would basically just get smoked for like a few hours every morning, and they had to do that for a week straight, and they'd have to do all this crazy like PT, and if they made it through, if the peers thought that they were good, then they'd be accepted, and then throughout the rest of the semester you would do slightly different things than everybody else. When it came to PT, you would do harder PT. Sometimes you would like do running, like you would ruck, do long ruck marches with a lot of weight. Very, very competitive people, very, very like high speed, full blooded, just want to be a ranger people. And it took a lot of time. There was a lot more time commitment for that, but that particular special group, that was one of the biggest ones that they were looking at. Like if you were good in that, if you were a part of that, then you were going to get extra points, which would help you later on when you're trying to contract and stuff. So if you had the time for it, I'd say do it. I didn't really want to do it at that point in my life. I just was just trying to focus on school, and I didn't really know if I wanted to do this ROTC thing, so I was just kind of doing like just what I was supposed to do. I think at one point I was part of some of the drill ceremony stuff later on, but yeah, there was like Sam Houston Rifles. I wasn't part of that. They would do a lot of the special drill and ceremony with the rifles. They would like twirl rifles in the air, and they would like do all the cool stuff with it. They would go to like big events in DFW and perform. We would also, if you're an ROTC, even if you're like a lower contracted cadet, like year 1 or year 2, I say contracted, non-contracted, it's going to be strongly advised, especially if you want to keep going in the program and you want to contract later on, that you will be in things like Thanksgiving parades. So normally there's one big event per semester that you'll be a part of. I remember being part of that. I can't remember what we did in the spring, but I know that there was some sort of like Thanksgiving parade that we were in. So it was like a drill and ceremony thing. You basically have a dummy rifle, and you're basically just walking down these streets that are not too far from school. So that was cool. And then every semester you'll have an FTX, which will normally be, from what I recall, about halfway through the semester. So you'll go out into the field for a few days. My second year, I think it was my second year, it was the second semester, no, I think it was the second year, was really cool. It was the fall semester, and we basically got rained out. It was insane. We did a bunch of land nav, we did a bunch of crazy stuff. We got like rained out, everything was flooded out. We got taken back, I think a little bit, no, we were supposed to be out in the field, and then it was so bad, like there was so much flooding that we had to all pile into this little like metal shed. It was crazy. I remember people going like people were actually freaking out, like actually scared and stuff. Cause they're like, this is just supposed to be some sort of college, like camping trip basically. And yeah. But I think being prior service in situations like that really helped, because people look to you and stuff like that happens. Eventually I got put into a leadership position. I was a squad leader for one of the companies that I was in. And so I would have to, as the time goes on, they give you a little bit more responsibility. And eventually in year 3 and 4, they expect you to be like in the top commanding positions. So people are going to be first sergeants, people are going to be XOs, there's going to be a company commander, there's going to be the battalion commander, there's going to be people in the background. You got the different S shops, they're going to be doing all the paperwork in the background. So, fun stuff. But the first 2 years, like I said, guys, I was in for a year and a half. It was pretty chill. It was really, really chill. I really enjoyed it. Some of the best memories I had. Met some really good buddies. We would go out during the week. We'd go to a cigar lounge nearby, smoke some cigars back when it was legal to do it, like 18. So it was a bunch of like 18, 20-year-old guys. We'd go out. So a lot of my buddies I was in school with, they ended up joining the National Guard later on after that, or full-time active duty. Just what happens, it's pretty common, especially for a lot of the 18-year-olds. After the first year, so spring, before I go forward, spring was actually really neat. Spring, to me, was a harder semester because the end of the year is coming up, and then you will be more focused on all the battle drills. So you're really going to be focusing on combat, the Ranger Handbook. Dude, if I have to hear about the Ranger Handbook one more time, I swear, dude, there was so much talk about the Ranger Handbook, it was crazy. That's like your Bible in ROTC. Everybody's gonna have a Ranger Handbook, everybody talks about it. It's like everything. And the reason for that is because between years 2 and 3, you go to advanced camp, which is basically your time to shine. Everything you've learned the first 2 years, everything you've done, or it's between years 3 and 4. Don't quote me on that. I'm trying to remember the timing because ROTC is different than like active duty. Basically, you are taking everything you've learned, you're going and you're doing it. No, I think basic camp is after year 2. So basic camp is like it's kind of like a basic training, but it's like 4 weeks. It's primarily geared towards officers, and then the big one is going to be, I believe, after year 3, which is like the hardest, most important year. Year 3, most people are going to be in the first sergeant. They're going to be they're going to be like company commander. Things are more stressful. There's a lot more commitment. You have to actually keep up accountability. You do counselings like you would in the military. Of course, you have to do your formations multiple times a week as a PT, and it's quite a bit. You know, I kudos to a lot of those people for putting themselves through that for ROTC. But spring focuses on that, and at the end of every semester, you'll have a little ball, like a little ceremony. So usually it's at the school. You'll go to like a nice little dinner, and you'll hear some speeches, and you'll see some PowerPoints. And usually they have dancing at the end, but nobody dances because most people are in their army dress uniforms or they're in really, really nice clothing, and it's just kind of like, you know, whatever. I can't remember. I don't think there was alcohol. There might have been a bar if you were of age. But yeah, you'll meet a lot of cool people, like really, really cool people. There's people I met in ROTC that I still talk to this day. ROTC is cool. The military's small, so if you stay in or you go a different route, you'll probably see them in the future. A lot of people make it through. ROTC is really not hard. It's just time consuming, and it can be socially stressful because, especially once you get to years like, even on my second year when I was like a squad leader, the time you have to put in, there is more expectation. You're having to do more things outside of class. And at that time I was working. I started to work close to full time. I was taking a full load of classes. I was still going PT and stuff. But what ended up happening was a couple of things. One, I just kind of fell out of love with the program. I love the people, I loved everything, but like from where I was at that point in my life, I'd always, I grew up working at a very young age, going to school, joined the military. At that point, I just kind of burned out. I was juggling so much. And then I was more obsessed with girls and not going to PT and stuff like that. So it just wasn't a good mix of things for me. And at that time, it was just better for me to step away from it. And if I had to do it all over again, probably would have been more disciplined. But at that time, that's just what I chose. And so I ended up not meeting the criteria. I think my at that year and a half point for going to PT, because you had to go to PT. If not, you had to pay back your room and board scholarship. So I had to pay that back. But yeah, that was pretty much it. I think I finished out the semester trying to remember now. I think I just stopped going to PT. Yeah, I just pretty much stopped going to PT. And then that was pretty much it. Like I was just done. It was one of those things where I was like, yeah, like just not, it's not for, this program is just really not for me right now. But I remember, so there's a few things I want to leave you guys with. So a few ways that you can do this to take full advantage of it. One, if you're in the National Guard, highly recommend taking advantage of the simultaneous membership program if you really, really, really want to be an officer. The thing is with ROTC, at least at the time, was you are not guaranteed active duty. So basically you could get in, you could spend 3-4 years in ROTC, you could go to your advanced camp, you could go get through commission, or you get through all your stuff, and then you, this might have just been for the simultaneous membership people, but you're not guaranteed active duty, which was weird. I think if you don't accept any scholarships, there is a scholarship that's like a guaranteed reserve or National Guard scholarship, which gives you a lot more money towards college, which is cool if you really just want to stay in the reserve side of things. But active duty, it's a little bit more open-ended. As an officer, this goes for active duty, OCS, West Point, no matter which route you go, you can choose your top 3 branches you want to go in, and there's a few of them. There's quite a few. Things like intelligence, infantry, CBurn, which is chemical, armor, you have quartermaster, you have transportation, right? AG, which is basically just HR. You have all these different branches you can choose from, but let's say you don't score very high, like your PT test isn't that good. When you go to advanced camp, a lot of these things are going to come around and they're going to grade you on like your PT, your leadership abilities to lead out in the field, your peer evaluations, right? And in the ROTC program at the school, to be contracted with ROTC, they're also looking for pretty much the exact same qualities. So it's a crawl, walk, run. Everything in the Army is a crawl, walk, run. So they're going to want to get you to that point where you can just, where it's like you've been doing the same thing the whole time. So they look at that. Again, you just want to make sure that you're a well-rounded person. Don't get into stupid trouble. You can still go to parties. I remember going to some parties. Just don't do anything crazy stupid. Again, stay away from drugs. And just, be good at PT. I don't know how many times I can say that. Just be good at PT. Like they look at that so much. PT is huge. It's huge. School's a really big deal, but PT is a really big deal too. But the program itself, guys, again, I wish I could say more about it. I wish I was in for longer, but you really have to enjoy what you're doing and try, if you can, try to get to a point where you don't have to work, especially your 3rd and 4th year, because the 3rd and 4th, what we call MS3, it's like military science, it's MS3 and 4, your 3rd and 4th years, you're going to be tasked with a lot more responsibility. You're going to be spending a lot more time outside of your classes and just life in general, coordinating a lot of things for ROTC. So be aware of that. Be very, very aware of that. I knew people who were working, they were MS3s, they were going to PT, they were in special groups, they didn't have any free time. Now they would still occasionally try to make it to a party here and there, but as far as like their life revolved around ROTC. You're going to meet a lot of different people in ROTC, just like you would the military, but ROTC is like a different kind. You're going to meet a lot of people who their whole personality revolves around ROTC and being an officer and being high speed. I knew people who came in, they were kind of cool, and then they ended up being able to commission or go to Ranger School, because I think you can go to Ranger School depending on how the contracts work out, and if you're in like the reserve side of things, sometimes they can like squeeze you in, or your unit can. But I knew people who, they just became like full of it, like, to each their own. But you'll see people's personalities change as they get more power, as they get more responsibility. Some of that's necessary, some of it's a little weird, but yeah, everybody everybody has a place and anybody can do it, really. You just gotta stay serious. Don't be one of those people, if you're gonna do it, who are just like, oh, I'm just gonna treat this like some after school, like whatever, like it's no big deal. If you, the more you put into ROTC, you will get out more. You, it's not one of those things where you can do all this stuff and then like nobody's gonna notice, no one's gonna care. Like you will get out more. Like if you show your face more, if you are socializing, if you are networking, if you are actually doing good at PT, special groups, I highly recommend joining at least one of them. You can join multiple depending on your schedule. Highly recommend joining at least one of them. Highly recommend, just doing your best, being a leader, figuring out what that means, reading books on it, asking people who are in leadership positions, asking the cadre tips and advice. Yeah, guys, that's pretty much it. I mean, you can go to the advanced camp after the third year, after MS4, once you're done with college. Sometimes people will have like an extra semester or two, depending on their course load, if they're not able to complete certain classes or something happened. But once you're all done with that, you can make it through advanced camp in your MS3 year, you're pretty much guaranteed a commission. Just don't do anything stupid. You'll get your degree, you'll commission. You might hang around for a little bit until the Army needs to pull you away. Sometimes people would stay in like limbo, waiting on their BOLIC date, which is their basic officer leadership course, for what they actually branch. So a lot of different things that can happen. I think from what I remember in school, if they were in that limbo, they would pretty much get room and board paid for. They would just be chilling, helping out a little bit in the background. They'd show up to PT. It was pretty chill for them, but you can earn a lot of money in it too. Like I said, simultaneous membership programs, there's opportunities for scholarships. There is, a lot of things you can double stack, especially if you're enlisted. But yeah, guys, that was my ROTC experience. I highly recommend it, at least for a semester. Like, do it for one semester. If you're going to college, if you're close to your university. I knew people who were driving like 30 minutes to go to PT in the morning, who were driving pretty far distances to come in and just go to PT, who lived pretty far away. So if you're able to, if you don't have a lot of bills, you don't have to work a whole lot, if your coursework isn't crazy, I'd say do it. Do it for a semester, do it for a year. It's gonna give you great leadership experience no matter what. It's gonna give you great accountability. You'll make some good memories. And hey, if you really like it, you might just end up being an officer going that route. So hey, guys, that's all I have for this video. Again, drop a like, go ahead and comment and subscribe as well. And we'll be back at you with the next one.